right, welcome in on a Wednesday. Maize and Blue Reviews. Good afternoon, Michigan football. Hope you're having a great time wherever you're at. We're here to talk a little bit about Michigan, and there's lots of things to talk about today. We have a lot of recruiting news, both on the football side and on the basketball side. And people love recruiting news, a lot of positive recruiting news coming Michigan's way. And you could make a case just in the, I don't know about the nick of time, but at a good time to have some positivity surrounding Michigan, both on the hardwood and on the gridiron. But we'll start talking about Michigan and Michigan State on Saturday night. So Michigan, after this past Saturday, the season took a big thud, and that's where it sits right now. You'll be tuning in on Saturday, and for Michigan, any positive scenario remaining that you'd want to do by going over the remaining games, it involves winning on Saturday. I don't see any positive scenarios with Michigan dropping the game Saturday and then, they could still beat, sure. Okay. Right. So you start saying, well, is this a must win for Michigan on Saturday? It is in what I just talked about. If there's going to be anything, you could still, no, they're not going to the college football playoff. No, they're not going to have a four-peat as Big Ten champs. But there are some things that they can do to put one foot in front of the other and make you feel good about, what would it be? Being bowl eligible. That would be one thing. And then, I don't know, that's the one thing about the team right here. There's not a lot of good things to say about them. And most of it has to do with the quarterback. I know people say, no, it's got a lot more to do with the quarterback, and that's fine. If you have a competent quarterback, if you have competent quarterback play, it's going to help out almost everything that you have a problem with. If you have a problem with more than just the quarterback, there's been a nice, I don't know if to say argument, disagreement, back and forth about, Michigan's a quarterback away from just having one loss. I think you can argue that pretty easily. And you might say, well, yeah, but what about the defense? And it's like, okay, yeah, well, everybody can have their opinion on it. And it's one of those things, like, it's like saying if Jim Harbaugh was here, they'd only have one loss. Who knows? Who knows? You think Jim Harbaugh, if he wasn't doing what he did into January with the Chargers, and then he was in spring ball, maybe he would have gone after a quarterback, but maybe not. You don't know that. I mean, but when you're Harbaugh and there's a legendary status, and it's part of, like, with this team and where they're compared to last year in everything. So it's just like that defense, the defense, they're not the 23 defense, but if the 23 defense was hung out to dry in a lot of the spots this year, sure. I mean, they were the 23 defense. They would have responded more than likely, but you could chase your tail on a lot of that. My point with the quarterback situation is that it's dragged the whole thing down, and it reminds me, it reminds me of some other seasons where Michigan, where it was the first year with Rich Rod. I think they had Nick Sheridan, and I know people say Stephen Threet. Stephen Threet was better than Nick Sheridan, where you knew you really didn't have a chance because of the quarterback play. It has that feeling. It also reminds me a lot, it happens every year in the NFL. You have these teams where they have their starting quarterback get hurt, and then you're watching the quarterback play from the backups in the NFL, and you're like, this is brutal. This is unwatchable. And the team can't do anything. They look terrible. Coaching looks terrible. Everybody looks terrible. And that's kind of the way it goes. So I don't have to sit around beating the dead horse, but I would putting it out there. I think it's the obvious thing when it comes to Michigan, the quarterback play. We'll get to more on that. I'm picking Michigan to win the game. A close game by 2 points, 19-17, bunch of field goals and a touchdown for Michigan. I thought the line was, when it came out on Sunday, way too high at 7. Obviously, having Michigan only win by 2, I still think that line might be a little bit tall. But hey, if you're someone that thinks that you're sharp like the gamblers, then go ahead and make your move on it for Michigan. Or I don't look at it the other way. I mean, when it comes down to Michigan, I'm not, even if I didn't think, like, there's a when you have the kind of play that they've had from their quarterback, plural, sure, there's a chance that they could lose this game. But it's not like I'm going to be betting against Michigan. And Michigan State, as exciting as their quarterback has been, Childs running around and making plays, he's also thrown a bunch to the other team as well, what you expect from a freshman quarterback. We'll get to more on freshman quarterbacks, maybe even true freshman quarterbacks, coming up a little bit later on, just in a few minutes on this very podcast. So that's where I sit on the game here. I think Michigan's going to win. It's a must win if they want to get into any kind of positive scenarios with this remaining schedule that they have. I don't see anything where they drop this game and are they going to beat Ohio State or something to save the, save the team or save the season or anything else. Okay. I don't see that part. Anything can happen kind of thing, but that's where I'm sitting right now. We'll take some, before we get to the recruiting part, we'll take some of the questions and points from the people out there just to see where you are at. Andre says he doesn't think this downturn is a terrible thing in the modern NIL transfer and recruiting environment. Big time freshmen and transfers. No, Michigan has a lot of available playing time next year. Well, it's all perspective. I think that you can get back up on your feet a lot quicker. I'll agree with you there because of the transfer portal and the ability to go out there and flip your team. I don't think there's going to be any doubt about that, but let me see exactly how you put that again. Doesn't think this downturn is a terrible thing. Well, it's not a terrible thing in terms of them being able to bounce back. It's a terrible thing, though. It kind of reminds you of years past. And then it also, I know there was this argument over the summer. There would be a lot of people like, I'm good. Michigan won the Natty. I don't really care what happens. I'm good. They're good for a couple of years. And people would say, what are you talking about? It's the next season. Let's go. And really over the last 3 years, sure, the Georgia loss and the TCU loss were, they stung. The TCU loss stung a lot more because Michigan was a favorite in that game. And you were thinking that they were going to take the next step and get to the national championship game where anything can happen. But the anything can happen, it was what happened to Michigan in that semifinal against TCU. Michigan would have been about that big of an underdog against Georgia 2 years ago that TCU was against Michigan. And of course, TCU played well and they were able to beat Michigan. So my point there is that it was a real 3-year run that was just, it was like that a long time ago when Michigan played. Every year you felt like they had a chance to, if things fell right, if they played well, that they had a chance to win the Big Ten and then move on. And then that's the one thing that stings this year about this year. Sure, now, they lost this and they lost that. I thought with the defense that they had and that with the philosophy of the thing that they were known for the most, which is their offensive line, that they could develop a quarterback that they could have been a player in this year's college football race. But as we have seen, they are not. Rico says, sorry, but I want MSU to beat us so we can get a new coach. Yeah, that line of thinking is not going to get you anywhere. Do we want to play the game? All hell will break loose. I'll give you that, Rico, if Michigan State beats Sharon Moore. But you might call for Sharon Moore being fired after the game. There'll be a lot of people that would call for Sharon Moore getting fired if he gets beat by Michigan State. But he could lose the rest of the games. And I think Sharon Moore is going to come back and get an opportunity next year. And so that angle of rooting against Michigan because you're not in that position. Michigan's not in that position, but you want to put yourself in that position. I don't think that's a very good position to put yourself in. That's not healthy. Not going to be healthy for you because there's zero chance for it to happen. You want to root for something off the field or something. I don't know. Do I think Michigan will start losing recruits if they keep losing? I think that possibility is already out there. When you're in this, Andres talked about the recruiting environment. The recruiting environment now is different than it's ever been, where it's like, you 1 minute you like Michigan because you think you can play for a Big Ten championship. You think you can get into the college football playoff, and then you watch the team this year, and then every single call you get is like, there's no hope in sight there. And plus, we're ready to, line your pockets with a bunch of cash. Yeah, I mean, that's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. And it's going to be a fight right till a signing day. I do think that when you have a commitment, you're still better, and it's different. You get a kid like Gatch, who's from the state of Michigan. I would put him at, I don't know, close to 100%. Like, it would be completely shocking if he ended up flipping. But then you start going to wherever, the higher the rated guy and the further he is away from Michigan, just in general, I would think that the possibility of them flipping would be higher. Whether it's greater than 50% flipping. I don't know about any of that, but sure, there's going to be a chance. Even the last couple of years, there's been, even when Harbaugh was there, he would flip a couple guys, and Michigan, would end up getting a couple guys flipped. That is kind of what happens. Now, the golfer Martinez could generate some recruiting boom as opposed to a bust. I do think, and we're going to get to that coming up in the recruiting part of this, where it's different now. It's going to be different for Michigan. Michigan's philosophy, there's been a change afoot in how Michigan is operating in recruiting high school players. That's what it looks like. And if we didn't know, I think we know now. Kia Owie, sorry if I'm not getting that right, off of Twitter. It's good to see him. If we win out, we'll make the playoffs. Based on what I have seen, that will never happen. Yeah, I think you can play the Tiger card. Look at the Tigers this year. They had a 0.2% chance on August 11th of making the postseason. Look what happened. So never count them out. It's going to be a lot of people. I mean, if you're a Michigan fan, of course. I mean, you're going to watch Saturday. You're going to root for them. And, you're going to hope they win. And then a win makes you feel so good. You say, hey, why not beat Oregon? And let's go there for a second. If Michigan beats Michigan State, I'm expecting them to beat Michigan State. Even with what I've seen all year long, I would not think that they would beat Oregon, but let's just play the game. If they beat Oregon, well, then you do start thinking about, hey, stranger things can happen. But let's wait and see what happens Saturday and then against Oregon before we start talking about winning out. I'm with you. Nice initials. John says it doesn't help when the offense can't stay on the field and give them the rest. Yeah, talking about the defense. Yeah, sure. No doubt. Is that the biggest thing? I think the biggest thing is they haven't, it's been Wink. and his coordination and his changes. I call them, I will call them drastic changes in his verbiage, in everything that has gone on with this Michigan defense. They had something over the last 3 years that worked really well, and I know that he was the architect, but it has changed where I can recall in the spring, Makari Page stood up there and said, "Are there any, any differences with Wink?" And he said, "Everything's different. Everything we're doing is different." And then, everybody kind of laughed. I came back and said, "Well, wait a second. You're saying that the guy that came up with this defense and is credited with this defense, and now he's coming in after what he's seen for the last 3 years, he's changed everything." And Page was like, "Yeah." And then after the Texas game, he was saying, Page, it was Page again, one of the captains, was saying, "Yeah, we have communication issues. Communication issues. So when you went through all of this and you're into the second game and you had communication issues against Texas, and then in the bye week, he was talking about angles and guys not being in the right place." And I don't know. That comes back to me. It's the coaching, but it's the coordinating of the defense. And, you bring in somebody and you make him the second highest paid defensive coordinator, and he has his idea on how he wants to get things done. And, if I was in there and he would have had me as his assistant and he would have said, "Yeah, we're changing everything over," I would have said, "Hey, wait, how about not changing everything? Let's stay with what has been working." And he would say, "I've been in this game and I know what works and we're going to do it my way." And then, so he's had that opportunity to sink or swim, and he is sunk mostly when it has come down to it. So that's it. We'll get a couple other folks in here. Rico saying he feels bad for Khalil and Loveland being robbed of a person who can get him the ball. Well, sure. I feel bad for this. I feel bad for everyone. I feel bad for the team that they're not winning. Yeah, the individual players, even the coaches, and I know they all get paid really well and everything else, but I feel bad for the fans. It's one of those things where it's been a rough year. Those two guys, in spite of all of it, have really had excellent seasons. Mustafa, if we do anything this year, at least having this win would be nice. I agree with you on that. John is asking, why is Indiana 7-0 with a new coaching staff? They're good coaches. Good coaches. They knew what they were doing. We are going to get to this hype coming up. Rico is talking about it. Yeah, I mean, this is the top story. I have to say, I buried the lead. I think the most exciting thing would be talking about Bryce Underwood. I'm bringing it up the. So they're going to bring it up the rear. I am going to end the show with Bryce Underwood, because I think that I wouldn't go anywhere else. So that's why I am waiting to talk about people are ready for recruiting. I can see that. JR is saying Michigan should absolutely beat MSU. Yeah, they should, but when you don't have the requisite play at quarterback, we know how important it is, then anything can happen. Michigan is in a spot where they can lose this game. I'm not going into Saturday night thinking, "Oh, yeah, I would not want to, whatever, put a bunch of money on Michigan, to win the game and on the money line." Or I'm not making any bets with any Michigan State fans about, you got to come on and put a green shirt on, or as I did a few times when I worked in Detroit, learned my lesson. It was a bad stretch when I worked in Detroit, Michigan State with D'Antonio, and I bet 20 burgers from Greenhouse one time, and I had to pay that bet. That's not running fun. So I'm not doing that. Thanks, Rico. I appreciate it. JR is picking Michigan to win by 17. Sure, it can happen. It definitely could happen. I don't see it that way. Here is Saul Goodman. I mean, Jimmy. He says Wink isn't the biggest problem. That would be Sharon. And he's talking about also name calling the athletic director. Yeah, I think at this point right now, when you're Ward Manuel, he's a good person to direct your anger at. Whether it's right or wrong or however you feel about it, that's what he's there for. Just go ahead. If it wasn't for Ward, Jim Harbaugh would still be here. And, so maybe JJ would have stayed around. Jim would still be here and everything would be great. You can make the argument. I mean, there's books being read. Jim's, best friend is still out there on Twitter. I saw him just a day or two ago, talking about, oh yeah, Jim would have stayed around. And there's a lot of people that believe it. So if you are one that believes that, I have my opinion. You have yours. And it's a thing that it's an easy thing for you to make you feel good. You just have to, because you can just say, what's the problem? And you can just say, there it is. One problem, and it's that guy. And so you don't have to go any further. That's it. Andres doesn't think Childs is a good quarterback. He is mid. Well, he's a real playmaker from what I've seen. I haven't watched all their games, but the times that have watched him, he is very elusive. He can run around. But yeah, he'll throw the ball to the other team. He'll turn it over, but he'll also make a few plays. He's better than anything that Michigan's putting out there. I know that's not saying, what are we doing? Everything that we're going to do. When he come down to that, keep taking shots at him. Whatever. I'll tell. Before we go to the recruiting part, we'll take one more. Don says, the season is over when there's more discussion about recruiting than there is about the remaining games. And that's where, this we're going to get to. And before we get to football, basketball season is rapidly approaching. And Michigan last week pulled in their first commitment, Dusty May did, for the 25 season. He got a 4-star out of California, a 6'5" small forward named Winters Grady. He committed to Michigan, so that was nice for Dusty to pull in his first commitment. Now, today, or was it last night? I forget. I think today he made it official. Oscar Goodman, an international player. He's from New Zealand. He is a 6'7" forward who committed to Michigan. He was down to Ohio State, Georgetown, and Texas Tech. I watched 5 minutes of his video today. He's, it's a very easy. I have to admit, you'd say, oh, you're going to go with a tall, redheaded white dude, and so you're just going to compare him to Danny Wolf. And yeah, I am. So that's who he looks like. I mean, he looks like him with the red hair. And he's 6'7", Wolf's 7 foot, but he kind of stands outside and shoots, and he's a good passer. And it's kind of like what Danny Wolf is. So yeah, I mean, that's the comp, a smaller Danny Wolf. So that is good for Dusty. But Dusty in November has 2 players on tap, and this player is the one that I want, and I think everybody else does as well. His name is Trey McKinney, and he's from Flint. He plays for St. Mary's. He is a top 20 player nationally, and he is a 6'4". They have him as a wing here. All right, but it says 4-star. He is, if you look at Rivals and how they have their 5 stars, he's like just on the outside looking in of being a 5-star. I think some other services have him a little bit higher. He would be the jewel of this class. He would be a great get. And Michigan is right there. And he's making a decision coming up next month. And a lot of people think that he is going to be maize and blue. And this would be a great get for Dusty. And he would be on fire and rolling and everything else. So hopefully he does get Trey McKinney, who also likes Georgetown and USC, but he loves Michigan, and he is from right here in the state of Michigan. So that would be great. Also, keeping an eye on a big man from the desert, Xavier Stanton. Now, Stanton is Michigan, UNLV, Stanford, and BYU. He's a 7-footer out of Sierra Vista in Vegas. He's making his decision, I think it might be early November, maybe the 4th. And I was just looking today, if you were handicapping this, Michigan, UNLV over Stanford or BYU, those are more, I don't know, they didn't put them as dark horses, but Michigan, UNLV, obviously UNLV right there in his home where he's playing his high school ball, but somebody to keep an eye on, and also somebody that you would love to have. He's almost a top 30, ranked 31 nationally. So Michigan could be getting a top 19, a top 31 in Stanton and McKinney to add to the 2 others in winners, and Goodman, who are already in. So that would be some great news for Dusty May. So that's it. They cannot enroll now. They are for the 25 season. That's it. Now we're on to football. And Michigan did lose that game against Illinois on Saturday. But after the loss to Illinois, a guy that people have been following his recruitment is Andrew Babalola, and he committed to Michigan over the weekend. And this is great news. He is as good as it gets. He's listed as a 4-star on Rivals. I'm told that he is listed higher almost everywhere else. Everywhere else, it seems like they give out 5 stars, like Candy. Rivals is a little more stingy on giving guys 4 or 5-star, but whatever. He's a good one, and Michigan's got him. And you feel good, even with how the season is going. You know, we were talking earlier about guys looking elsewhere, and obviously everybody's going to be getting courted all the time. But when your team's taking a slide, the phone's ringing that much more, saying, "Hey, get out of there." Babalola was a Michigan Stanford guy, and that's where it looked like he was going to go. He's waited all this time before pulling the trigger. So I would say, even though he is from Kansas, it's still looking pretty good for Michigan on the AB front, who he just committed. So that's some great news. You probably knew about that, a couple days old, so you feel pretty good. Now, Michigan, I looked at the Rivals.com team rankings today, just right before I came on. Michigan has 17 commitments, and Michigan ranks 15th on the Rivals.com team rankings. I'd like to be in the top 10 when it's all said and done. You might, hey, you say top 5, whatever. Top 10, I would take a top 10 right now, is what I am saying. All right. I said that I am saving the best for last, and here it is on the screen. I am showing a picture of a quarterback from Belleville, Michigan, named Bryce Underwood. Bryce Underwood is everything that you want in the world as a recruiting fan. He checks every single box. He is a 5-star of all 5 stars. He's ranked 2 overall in the entire class. We all know that Michigan has quarterback issues. We've already talked about it today. He, you would feel, would step right in and could play as a true freshman next year for Michigan. He could start for the Maize and Blue under center next year. Now, Michigan was in on Underwood, and he committed to LSU when everybody was like, we didn't want him anyways. And he's just going for the money. He'll be in the transfer portal in a couple of years. He's Dante Moore 2.0. It's understandable that people would have that take. We didn't want him anyways, that one. But what has changed, I think there's a bunch of different things that have changed. One is Michigan's season has gone sideways, and it's because of the quarterback position. If they don't have the worst quarterback room in the country, if they're one of the worst quarterback rooms in the country, we don't need to just pound on the quarterback room. Everybody knows it, but that's part of it. It's the situation that they're in. What better to make Michigan fans who are so frustrated with the quarterback play and searching for answers to bring the top quarterback in the country, the number 2 player, a true 5-star in every person that's ever watched him, one of the greatest high school quarterbacks ever to be ranked coming out of the state of Michigan. There he is, and he's right down the road. There's the other box. Let's check that one. He's a local kid. You can ride a bike on a nice day from Belleville to Michigan. I mean, it's a drive and a 6-iron for U of M. He's got a connections, his family. When you talk about it, they like Michigan. I think they might love Michigan. So what are we going to say about Underwood here is that he would do a lot to salve over the disappointment of this season if Michigan was able to land him. You might even say that you would trade a season like Michigan is having on the football field. And if you're able to get Bryce Underwood, it would make it all better. Recruiting has that effect on you, especially when you have the bright lights and the 5-star of a local talent like Underwood. What it would do is it would seemingly make everything right, and Michigan would be back on track. Doesn't mean they're going to win the national championship next year, but everybody would start thinking about national. How do you win? We just saw you get a real one. J.J. McCarthy was a real one. And you're like, how do you get a real one? Well, Underwood looks like that. There's no guarantees. We know that with the high school kids. But, if you get one and he is the real deal, what it can do for you is seemingly everything. So here he is. He did commit to LSU. And Michigan is going to try to get him. I say, what's changed? Well, the Michigan season has changed. The quarterback room, we've gone over that. And the other part here is I think Michigan, they had their recruiting philosophy, and we've all argued it over the last few years, but it's worked for them. It worked to the tune of a national championship. It was the same thing with the transfer portal. Michigan's going to have to change their how they transfer players in. They're going to get killed with the transfer portal. Well, whatever they did, they were able to get a bunch of guys. Now, they didn't hit the jackpot like they did the previous 2 years in the transfer portal this year, but they're good. And the transfer portal, they're able to go out there. It looks like they were able to, what I'm looking at, is they were able to spend in the transfer portal. The last part and piece to Michigan recruiting was that it looked like Michigan was reluctant to spend upfront guaranteed money to prep players. Whether it was because actually you're not supposed to, nobody really is paying it. I think that's what it was. Hey, actually, it was against the rule, but hey, you can talk whatever you want about rules and everything else and what they mean. Nobody's following that rule, but just swipe that away. It looks like now that Michigan, they're also, to me, if they're getting back. There's been a number of people. Our big guy, Adam Gordy from Rivals.com. He put a post on the Maize and Blue Review. He wasn't talking. I'm just going to. I should have written it down exactly what he said, but it wasn't somebody that he talked with in the family for the Underwood, but somebody very close. And Michigan is back in, according to Gornian. I believe there's I'm not following every other person out there that's talking about Underwood, but I've seen a lot of buzz. I mean, if you're following Michigan and you follow recruiting, you may have noticed over the last 2 weeks there's been a lot of Underwood buzz. And the other part is that you just had Portnoy, I don't know, a month ago, a couple weeks ago, talk about throwing millions of dollars on the table. And, maybe that's what it is. Maybe the money's talking. Maybe the Underwoods were always interested in Michigan, but Michigan's approach was, hey, if you come on in here, you can get a $10,000, whatever. I don't know what it is. Michigan's talking, they're talking turkey now with Underwood. He is going to command millions. I don't know how many, 2, 3, 4, 5. Your guess is probably as good as mine when it comes down to that. I'll say 5 million. But Michigan's got that big stadium over there. And going to be a lot of green and white in that stadium. And, I get the text and, I got friends that are sending me jokes about, hey, you buy a 2-liter of Coke and you get a couple tickets free. Michigan needs to fill that stadium. People are down right now. This would pick them up, being able to get a quarterback. And we know how important it is. I don't have to go over all of that. So it's just Underwood. You may say, what do I have to add to this story? To me, it's an indication that U of M is changed their philosophy and how they're going to recruit prep players. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going after, that the floodgates are going to open and they're going to start going after all the 5 stars that are out there. I know that would be music to a lot of people's ears. I'd like that myself. I wouldn't mind it. But we have talked about it over the last couple of years. Why don't they select a few players and go in on them? This is a player. So I don't know if maybe they are going to go hog wild on 5 stars, and maybe it's going to come down to just how much money they can get in their coffers from the Michigan fans. Like, they're showing this now, that they're open for business, that they've got the money. Who wants it? Michigan's a player now. Come on down. Well, that money's got to come from somewhere. It's not coming from Michigan. It's going to come from you. At least it seems that way in the early going. Now, you might not like that. That can be something that you could be like, that's a bad move by Ward. Maybe it is. Ward's, his job with everybody else out there. They're sitting on a big pile of money. What I've noticed that people that have a big pile of money, they don't want to just give it all away. They want to keep it for themselves and everybody that they work for. So Michigan, but it does come to the point where you gotta spend to get it. So, well, I don't know. That's just all conjecture on my part. But it goes back to that other thing. If you want to be mad, just blame Ward. If they don't get Underwood, blame Ward. If they get shut down with any other high price or big name talent, blame Ward. That's an easy thing to do. And again, it's an easy argument to make. And you might really feel like you're right about it. So that's it. That's it. Bryce Underwood, Michigan is back in it with him. What I think, why would he change his mind about LSU? The money? And maybe Michigan has also changed their tune. Remember, was it I don't remember what it was, some kind of interview about Michigan maybe running the ball all the time, and he put some smiley faces or something underneath, like, why would anybody want to go to Michigan if you were a quarterback? Because that's all they do is run the ball. It was something like that. Maybe Michigan has said, look, yeah, smash is what we want to do, but what we want to do is get a player like you and give you, let's call it $6 million. He's wearing a number 6 jersey. We want to give you $6 million, and we want to also give you a bunch of wide receivers, and we want to throw the ball. We're going to change our approach. It's all about you, Bryce. Now, do I think Michigan is, as you might say, Are you kidding me? You're going to let the kid call all the shots. You're going to change the offense. You're going to now just be hunting down and offering more money to big time wide receivers as well. And I would say that the answer to that is yes, 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 and yes. Everything that was going on, it was worth to me. It was like Sherrone Moore. People are like, you really think still that Sherrone Moore deserved the job? Absolutely, he deserved the job. Michigan had put themselves in a position over the last 3 years, and Moore was the guy. He was the guy that deserved the job to see if they could continue on with what they were doing. He checked all the boxes. You could say, well, he never coached anywhere. So what? Dan Lanning didn't coach anywhere before. He was at Georgia, then Oregon tabbed him. Kirby freaking Smart was a defensive coordinator at Alabama, and then Georgia tabbed him. And the list goes on and on for every guy you can say, oh, he should have been coaching here. Dabo Swinney worked his way up as a GA and a wide receiver before he was at Clemson. He didn't have any head coaching experience. Who else somebody off the Harbaugh tree that Harbaugh said, hey, this is the guy? I don't know. That's another one that, you standing up and saying that he was the right guy heading into this week after how they played. It's not music to everyone's ears. They don't want to hear that. People want to hear more about let's get rid of him rather than, he was the one that deserved the job and he's coming back pretty much no matter what. But that's just my opinion on it. I know a lot of people have differing opinions when it comes down to that and who deserved it or ever else. And, but it changes weekly when it comes down to, we should have had this guy, should have had that guy. I'm perplexed about the quarterbacks as much as anyone else. I don't know. Well, they've seen it in practice and then it goes into the game and they don't see it. I'm not at the practices. So I talked to some people that were at the practices. You notice that we didn't talk too much about the quarterback position and what we saw at the practices this year. A couple guys that I knew that went to the practices, they weren't talking about, oh, man, ball's flying around. Looks really crisp out there. I don't know. They dropped the ball on that. That's the part where I know if you're somebody that thinks, oh, this is just they should probably cut their losses. If these guys didn't know with what they had here from what we're seeing, I see that. I know what you're saying completely about that. It's weird. I remember for 3 straight years going to a bunch of Lions practices. And I'd come back and people would say, well, what did you think? I'd say, Kelvin Johnson's great. He stands a helmet taller than everyone else. And if I didn't know who he was, I'd say, who's that? Guy's faster than everybody. He's bigger than everyone. And he makes unbelievable catches. He's a Hall of Famer. He's one of the greatest wide receivers ever. It makes sense. Who else stood out? The quarterback, Matt Stafford. Oh, man. His ability to throw the ball on a rope all the time, every rep. Just what about this other guy? I think he was wearing number 5. Oh, dude, I don't know why he's on the team. He throws duck after duck. He is not accurate. I don't know why he's on the team. His name was Drew Stanton. And every time that they put him in a preseason game, he played great. Scrambled around, made plays, threw the touchdown. Every time he came in, Stafford got hurt in a couple spots. He came in for the line. He played well. Led him to a victory. Went on to Arizona, won a few games. He was a serviceable quarterback. But my point here is if you'd have watched Drew Stanton through those, 10, 15 practices over 3 years that I watch, we would all say the same thing. This guy can't play. I don't know why he's on the team. He's no good. Now this is in reverse. I mean, some guys are gamers, and then other guys that they can do everything in practice, and they get into the game, and you don't see it. Then that's like what the situation looks like here at Michigan. So that's where I'm at. Okay, let's take some of the feedback. I said an awful lot here today, and let's go through it. Rico's talking about qualified coach. Slippin' Jimmy. Wonder why Michigan couldn't find a single soul who has been a head coach before. Yeah, I explained that. Like, The whole part, I'm not anybody that's bringing to the table. There's a lot of criticism for Sharon Moore. Why he couldn't figure out the quarterback position being number one. A lot of indecisiveness. His coaching hires. You could go over some of those too. And I'm going to be with you on the quarterback for sure. But the part about not hiring somebody that had experience is just, what about all the guys and the best coaches right now in the game who didn't do that? I'll tell you what it is. Finding a good coach before anybody else is the way to go. A young coach who is able to get it done. That's the way to do it. That's what Oregon did. That's what Georgia did. That's what Clemson did. There's two different ways to go about it. You want to put Ryan Day in there? I don't know. Did he have head coaching experience before he was at Ohio State? I mean, he's up towards the top, and he has been ever since he's been there, even though he's born on third. So the part about having somebody that coached before, I'm not buying that. So it's something that you can put out there, but you lose that argument almost immediately. I have better coaches, more championships currently, more conference champions, more national championships, more winning percentage than you do. So that's a bad argument. So stop making it. Go somewhere else. No, don't. I'm sorry. I don't know why I would say that. Stay here. I like to, talk it over. Andre says, looks like basketball's getting NIL in order. If football can just be competitive in that space, Michigan will be fine moving forward. I think I talked about that now. Jimmy says Bryce ain't coming here, nor should he if he cares about his career. Yeah, well, I think, Jimmy, you can make the argument that Bryce comes here and they change the offense and they put players around him, that this is a great spot for him. His family was just right down the road. Instead of, flying back and forth to LSU where nobody knows him, they can come right in here and be a local hero. So there's a lot of reasons that he should come in here. And Michigan just put a quarterback in the pros. First round pick. So there you go. Scott says we have a lot of donors who are upset at the lack of QBs. Yeah, we get a lot of everybody who's upset at the lack of QBs. Dre's is saying that Bryce isn't coming in. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not making a prediction that he's coming in. I'm making a prediction. I'm making a report? I'm saying that Michigan is trying to get back in, or they're back in. They're back in. Now, what does it mean when they're back in? They're talking to them. And, maybe, it wouldn't be unheard of. And it's also with them being back in, if the reason that they were out was because of, one, the offense that they run, and two, their approach with paying players. And that's why Underwood was like, I'm not going there. And now if Michigan's like, hey, we've got a big stack of cash and we're ready to change up to the offense to cater to you. Oh, that's kind of music to my ears if I'm Underwood. Well, and, Brian Kelly, look, so there might be some people saying, look, that guy's what do you call him? A snake oil salesman. Come on down here, Bryce, and play for LSU. Come up with the worst Southern accent. They'll be like, oh, he's from up in Michigan. Let me put my Michigan accent on. Well, Brian Kelly's not a real one. He might be able to see through that. Scott talking about Scott, you might have just got in here late. We talked about that. We get some jokes. We get some, people having fun. Look, and what can you say about the quarterback? Don is saying it's genius to forego development of the quarterback roster as a recruiting tool for a 5-star quarterback. Well, I mean, they're desperate. There is that part. But what if you want to play immediately? I don't know. I get that part. I don't think I'm not here to argue that Michigan's the best spot for Underwood and his development and going into the pros. What LSU has established and where they are at, I don't know what their roster looks like with the quarterbacks. I've seen the wide receivers, and I've also seen the quarterbacks and the Heisman Trophy. I mean, those are things that's why Underwood picked them in the first place. Those are going to be the things that ultimately are going to be the toughest to overcome. But you at least get back in the mix because you got money and you're willing to spend it now. And you're also talking about the offense. But yeah, a Heisman Trophy, Jaden Daniels, this most exciting player in all of football right now, whose name isn't Lamar Jackson. That's tough. Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr., Jetta, Jamar Chase. I mean, yeah, those are tough. That is a tough one. Moss, keep it going over there. So, yeah. I'm not, like you say, well, predict it. I'm predicting right now. I'm not. I'm just here for the excitement. If you're putting making me make a prediction, taking a lightsaber and saying you're going to strike me down with it, I'll say, yeah, he's probably just going to go to LSU where he's been. But I don't have a lightsaber bearing down on me, and I'm making the call. Jimmy doesn't care. He gone. Yeah, nobody's buying it. I'm not trying to sell. I'm just saying that Michigan's at least he's at least when they call. Before he was like, nope, nope. And just hanging up every time. Now I don't know, he's taking the call. Yeah. The part I don't really put I know that Sharon Moore and his staff have done a bad job to this point. I'm not arguing that. I'm not one just start calling people names. So there's some of that going on. Go ahead. Name calling. Now look, I know if things don't go well Saturday night, there's going to be a lot of that. All hell will break loose on Saturday night. I can recall 2020. Now, 2021 was bad, but then Michigan turned it around and made the college football playoff, and it was like it didn't even matter that they lost to Michigan State. But 2020, when Michigan was favored by like 40 points and lost to that game, I do recall on a Halloween night how that felt. Losing during a pandemic, losing to MSU. It wasn't nice. It was no fun. Going with a Wildcat. I didn't like the play call then. I didn't like it now. I didn't like Josh Gaddis explaining it. I didn't like anybody of people like, I didn't have a podcast back then, but I was looking online, a bunch of people that cover Michigan saying, oh, that was, if you blocked it right. Nah, I didn't know. There's a lot of people then that I knew. I'm like, I don't want to hear what you have to say about Michigan. If that's your take, that was a good call. I'm not listening to it. Okay. Probably been a few calls that I've made like that where people are thinking, we'll take 3 last points. And let's go to tallies. He says it looks like Mike Hart was right. Maybe they should have found a way to keep him like an offensive coordinator. Yeah, Mike Hart. Mike Hart was never staying at Michigan, even if Michigan wanted him to come around. That's you don't know it. that's a personal story with Mike Hart, and that's it. Don's all right. Jay Smith. Jay Smith is coming back. Hey, do you think JJ made a catastrophic decision? And then finally, the A train. They'll be name calling for sure if they start one of the turnover twins at quarterback. I think they're going to start one of the turn. I think they're starting Tuttle, and then they're going to have packages for Orchie. That's what it looks like. I thought, if I'm going to be blunt about the quarterbacks, I don't think any of the three are real playable college football quarterbacks. So I would go to the bench and the true freshman, Jaden Davis or Jaden Denegal. I talked with somebody this week since the Illinois game who goes to Michigan practices, and he said it's just not there with. I don't know. Maybe Davis can get better, Jaden Davis as a freshman, but he said he's not going to be any better than the guys that they have. Doesn't have zip on his ball. Doesn't have zip on the ball. Just he looks like somebody that would be out of place. That he's not in the conversation right now of being able to play. That doesn't mean that he didn't tell me. That doesn't mean that he can't be a player. He was pretty blunt about his assessment of being somebody that's been to practice, saying that Jaden Davis is not it. Now, that's just one person's opinion, but that is somebody that's been at practice. And it's because I was saying, look, the guy, he just has to complete a forward pass and be able to. Maybe he's got sometimes, like the three guys, I've watched enough football where I'm watching and I can say, that guy doesn't have the clock. That guy doesn't have the feel. The game's too fast. It's not a college quarterback. And I think that about all three Michigan quarterbacks. So my thought was, let's see with Jaden Davis. Maybe, he doesn't have to go out there. We're not talking about him zipping the ball all over the yard and, being some kind of championship quarterback. We're talking about a guy being able to make some reads and throw the football and be competent. But the guy that I talked to said, no, he's not able to do that. And apparently either is Denegal. So he didn't tell me about Denegal. He just told me about Davis. So that's not good news either. So we'll see. That's it. All right. Thank you, A-Train. Go ahead and, hit those likes. That's the same thing if you're listening on the podcast for that algorithm. It helps us out. Make a comment. Give us a rating. If you're like, this guy talks too much and I want him to provide more analysis. I want him to have more, whatever your opinion is. Or, hey, I'm going to give him a 5 stars. This guy's entertaining. Talking about Michigan, whatever it is. Go ahead and do that. Right now, I'm just taking it up to 1 hour. And that's what I'm going to do. I would like to tell all of you, if you like the Michigan talk, the way to keep it going, and I do it all day and all night over on the Maize and Blue Review. Go there and get full access to all of the coverage at michigan.rivals.com. We're talking Michigan basketball. We're talking about Michigan football with this game coming up against Michigan State. And just like now, somebody mentioned it earlier, boy, a lot more recruiting talk now instead of actual game talk. Yeah, that's kind of the way this season is gone. It's more about recruiting than it is about the actual play on the field. That's just how it is gone. And now all of a sudden there's a lot of basketball fans. Let's get that basketball season going. Hey, how's that hockey team doing? All of that, you get it. You understand. You've been around. We talk about it over on the Maize and Blue Review. Join up. I'd like to see you over there one more time. Michigan.rivals.com. We'll join you next on a Football Friday. Former Wolverine Jerry Dierio will be here. He'll talk about that game against Michigan State and the state of the program. Until then, so long, everybody. Thanks for watching. Have a great Wednesday. Take care.